Welcome to W Report. This is an analytical transformation of an interview. Gilbert, Trump once threatened Russia with an ultimatum, then backed down. Now the rhetoric is back. Talk of Ukraine winning, shooting down Russian jets, even taking Russian land. Europe seems thrilled. Do you see this as real escalation or just theatrics?
Well, before I begin, I'd like to congratulate you for putting on air very divergent opinions coming from different experts or people who are being watched on alternative media. An hour ago, I caught the first part of your interview this morning with Jeffrey Sachs, and what I'm about to say is sharply diverges with his interpretation of it. The general position within alternative media, Sachs is very well known and with good reason, and has a very wide following with good reason. I am much less known with good reason, and my views could be described as an outlier on what we're about to discuss. I think it would be very informative for viewers to juxtapose, to watch these two different interpretations when each of us has been asked this question by yourself. Jeffrey Sachs said that the performance of Mr. Trump at the United Nations was a colossal failure of leadership. I disagree entirely. But behind this is not just my opinion on that one issue and his opinion on that one issue, but where we both stand on everything about Mr. Trump. Since it is not widely discussed that Mr. Sachs is a globalist, by definition, given his position at Columbia University, he is a green movement supporter since his whole career, the last 30 years, has been support of sustainability. And Mr. Trump, in his speeches at the UN, trashed both positions, both globalism, particularly as the aspect of it relating to open borders, and very specifically trashed the green movement. So we're coming from very different positions on Mr. Trump in general. But let's look at what happened this week in his speech and in Trump's answer to reporters regarding both the shoot down of Russian jets violating airspace and the likelihood that Mr. Zelensky will succeed in recapturing his territory thanks to with the help he'll be receiving from the European Union. Now, Jeffrey Sachs was denouncing Trump for his lack of candor and for his not explaining to the American people the basis of his policy and for being duplicitous. My position is that if Mr. Trump did any of those things, he'd be impeached and removed from office within a few weeks. His policy on Russia, unlike his policy on the green movement or open borders, has little or no support within MAGA. It has still less support. In fact, is vehemently opposed by the majority of congressmen and by the majority of the American political establishment. For that reason, there is no candor in his speech. There is duplicity, double talk, and he's leading people on. This was my first conclusion regarding his remarks respect of the likelihood of Mr. Zelensky winning the war against Russia. There was an initial reaction among European leaders of glee. It was not just Lindsey Graham in the States who was taken in by this. It was all of the European the top leadership, whether it's Merz or Starmer or Macron. Macron was sitting next to Trump and looked very pleased to hear Trump say that he's really thinks Zelensky can succeed. Well, that was the initial reaction. After a bit of time and reflection, and after people like the Financial Times came out and said, hey, by the way, it could be that Mr. Trump's word shouldn't be taken at face value, and that in fact, he is setting the stage for an American off-ramp and for Europe to be blamed, because there will be a blame game, for the eventual defeat and capitulation of Ukraine. Well, that has now become a consensus view within the spokespeople for the European Union, like Kaja Kallas, who came out and said precisely that. But, well, not precisely. What she said was that Ukraine cannot succeed with the help of the European Union alone. That is a hint that the United States should be part of the party, of the group. But it suggests that they now understand that they have been taken for fools, or as one reader of my recent essay said, that Mr. Trump was trolling them, which is indeed my view of the situation. If he said openly that he expects Mr. Zelensky to be defeated and so on, he would find enormous resistance within all of Congress. So that's the game he's playing. Also, the question of the paper tiger remark, an insult to the Russians. Indeed, some Russian readers of my interviews, as they're translated into Russian by one or another Russian internet platform, have said that this was an insult to Putin. Well, let me give my brief explanation. Mr. Trump wants to be a peacemaker. He wants the war to end. And he's been told from all sides that he must pressure Mr. Putin. I believe he is pressuring Mr. Putin. And this taunt of Russia being a paper tiger was part of the pressure techniques of Donald Trump on Mr. Putin, but not in the sense that the European leaders and many in Congress would like it to be. The taunt is, Vladimir, get it over with now. Crush Ukraine now. Now, I said in a recent interview that it could be done if Mr. Putin took out the Ereshniks and destroyed Bankovskaya Ulitsa, the street in downtown Kiev where most of the government offices are. One Russian reader and commentator said, "You're 100% right." For a Russian to write that is rather brave. That's to be taken to be a Putin critic or an agent. But that is the message that Mr. Trump is delivering.
Sometimes only a strong leader can push for peace, like Reagan or Putin. Weaker ones aren't allowed that. Today, the West keeps claiming Ukraine is winning, Russia is collapsing, but few actually believe it, even in Europe. It seems like a narrative to prolong the war. What's your view on the roles of Starmer, Macron, von der Leyen, and Scholz? Is Europe just being used, as Tusk hinted?
Well, they are so heavily invested in all of this tripe and all of this nonsense that it's very difficult for them, particularly since they moved locked arms. And they are very critical of any member of the 27 countries that breaks ranks as Fico in Slovakia and Orban in Hungary have done. So they will make a move, but they're putting it off, a move towards reality to get out of the bubble. But let me be very precise about duplicitousness and lying to the public or falsehoods that Mr. Trump is spreading. That is in one area, maybe in a few other areas, but the area that is of note is his policy on the Ukraine-Russia war, and on what he expects American relations with Russia to be after the war. He doesn't dare set that out in a straightforward, honest, candid way, for the reason I just said. He will be he would lose all of his political support and become a lame duck president instantly, if not impeached, if that's what he did. At the same time, his speech to the UN was perfectly candid and honest and showed leadership. Whether you like the direction of his leadership is another question. That's a personal choice of anyone who's listening. But he was perfectly candid in expressing his heartfelt thoughts about open borders, about the renewables as a substitute for traditional fossil fuels. And he was perfectly honest and candid, if anyone bothered to listen to the end of his speech, about a multipolar world. Why do I say that? He established that it is the obligation of heads of state and heads of government to look after the prosperity of their peoples and to give support to the traditions, the national traditions of each country, which establish the uniqueness and the sovereignty of those countries. My goodness, that is a complete break with the underlying principles of the neocons and of globalism. And that was speaking from the heart. So he does have a heart, and he does speak from it, but not on Ukraine and Russia.
Mearsheimer suggested Trump's harsh rhetoric might just be a way to step back and shift the burden of war onto Europe. The United States offers weapons for sale, but no troops, no real funding. Meanwhile, talk of strikes deep inside Russia and downing jets grows louder. Moscow sees this as a direct path to war. Do you think this is just talk or a real move toward escalation?
It would be troublesome if there were anything to the claims and the demands and the fists in the air from European leaders. What Trump was doing was calling their bluff, and it is a bluff because he knows and they know that they don't have the wherewithal to do anything without the United States. And it also is calling the bluff of the Americans, the people under him, who are saying to him, and he then repeats, "Oh, we will ship 3,000 missiles to Ukraine so that they can strike deep." Well, that issue has been taken up by Russian analysts on air, on state television, and they insist these weapons haven't been produced yet. We're speaking about something 2 years, 3 years from now. When Trump said he's going to ship them, he didn't say when. Oh, he said when, but it wasn't serious. It's not going to be in 3 weeks. Therefore, this belligerency that seemed apparent and that could have made people like Lindsey Graham delighted is also a bluff and empty talk. In the meantime, Mr. Putin, the lawyer, he is a trained lawyer after all, who doesn't want to start to take an action that is no longer a special military operation, but in fact an act of war. He doesn't want to do that without the specific authorization of his parliament. That man, the lawyer, is working at odds with the man who is the supreme commander-in-chief of the Russian armed forces, which also was named Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. So we have this contradiction at the top of Russia, and it should be resolved. It's just been lingering and lingering.
Zelensky hinted at strikes on Moscow, but tomahawks reportedly aren't coming. That kind of action could trigger direct war between NATO and Russia. So beneath the wild rhetoric, some restraint remains. But what's your take on the actual front lines? Key areas like Kupiansk and the Zaporozhye axis seem close to encirclement. Ukraine escalates recruitment, Europe is fully committed, and diplomacy is gone. When desperation sets in, so does recklessness. Do you see signs of escalation, like Russia moving systems to Belarus?
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things. First, to ease the difficulty of listeners to this, Kupiansk has been described as a major fortified outpost of Ukraine. It is a logistical hub, yes, but it is also a city protecting Kharkiv. It's part of the Russian strategy of taking Kharkiv without a ground assault on Kharkiv that could be very costly in civilian deaths. And after all, Kharkiv is not just the second largest city in Ukraine, but it is essentially a Russian-speaking city. So they would be killing their own people if they came in and stormed the city. So they are going to encircle Kharkiv, and taking Kupiansk is a big part of it. They do this very dramatically by using underground pipelines from the Soviet era, gas pipelines, to again bring in secretly their own troops. Some of them, these pipes are pretty big because I'm told that some of the Russian forces were riding motorcycles through the or scooters through these pipes. Anyway, it was a very dramatic event. They already have their troops in the center of Kupiansk and they're cleaning it out. This is an important development for the northeast because this area, Kharkiv, was a staging ground for the attacks on the Russian frontier or border provinces, oblasts of Belgorod and Kursk. Moreover, very specifically, the 700 soldiers whom the Russians are said to have encircled inside Kupiansk, Ukrainian soldiers, a number of them were what is called the Russian Volunteer Army or Corps, which were precisely the people, defectors from Russia, who were armed and sent in by the Ukrainians to commit acts of terror and murder civilians in the first Ukrainian incursion on border areas, which was approximately 1 year ago, and before the Kursk action, Belgorod. So the Russians are very keen to murder all of them. And I think they've taken out 250 out of the original 750. But that is not the main front. The main front is, as you said, is in the Donetsk oblast, and that is where the Russians are advancing and are likely to do in the city of Pokrovsk, which is known in Russian as Krasnoarmeysk, something similar to what they're doing now in Kupiansk. And yet, there are other things afoot. You've mentioned Zaporozhye, yes, but there's something more, I think, more important for us to understand how this war will end that's now being discussed on Russian television, and that is the need to take Odessa, because Odessa is rather close. If you look at the map, it's maritime terms, it is rather close to Crimea. And the British and French have looked at Odessa as a key base for precisely that. So the Russians now are also turning their attention to Odessa to be captured. And if they capture it, then this tells you a lot about how the war will end, because once the rump Ukraine does not have Odessa, it loses much of its interest for Britain and France. So this is the way the war is going, but all of this is going terribly slowly, and the world doesn't stand still. This is why I believe Mr. Trump is pushing Putin to get it over with by some stunning act, like a Reshnik attack on Kiev, that decapitates the Kiev regime.
Doctorow's message is clear. Trump isn't leading, he's backing out, while letting Europe take the fall. His support for Ukraine is all theater. At first, European leaders cheer. Then they realize they've been played. Western leaders are stuck in their own myths. Trump, honest on other issues, is totally evasive on Ukraine. The threats of escalation? Just bluff. Missiles aren't ready. Soldiers aren't there. Even Russia is moving cautiously. Meanwhile, Trump seems to be pushing Putin to end the war, fast and hard. What we see is a performance of strength, of strategy, of unity, masking fear, exhaustion, and political desperation. Thanks for watching. Support the channel if you find this format valuable. More deep dives are coming soon. Until then, think for yourself and draw your own conclusions.